Have you ever thought she was your destiny, only to realize she was the structure holding you together? She gave your chaos a shape. She gave your fear a direction. You didn't just love her. You leaned on the idea of her to keep from unraveling. She wasn't your piece. She was your placeholder. And when she left, you didn't just lose her. You lost the story that made everything else feel bearable. You didn't fall in love. You found shelter. That's the part no one ever says out loud, because love, especially when it feels overwhelming, obsessive, all-consuming, is rarely about connection. It's about containment. And the deeper the ache, the more urgent the need to believe in her, in the idea of her, in the story she allowed you to wrap around your anxiety like armor. Kierkegaard saw this clearly. He knew the human soul wasn't simply hungry for intimacy, it was terrified of meaninglessness. Romantic love, for many men, becomes the most elegant solution to that terror. It gives structure to chaos. It gives suffering a direction. It transforms existential drift into emotional pursuit. You weren't chasing her. You were chasing form. Not meaning, not fulfillment, form. A stable idea to orient your life around, something sacred enough to silence the noise inside your mind. When she smiled at you, it felt divine, not because of who she was, but because she temporarily erased the shapelessness of your being. What you called love was a form of protection. She didn't rescue you, she interrupted your free fall. And in that interruption, you called her everything. You see, this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about avoidance. Love, for the emotionally unanchored man, is a strategy, a sophisticated one. It's not overt. It doesn't scream. It whispers, "Here is someone who will fix the formlessness inside you." And once that whisper settles into your bones, you start mistaking her presence for peace. But it's borrowed peace. It's quiet that belongs to someone else. And when she leaves, when she disappoints you, retreats, or simply reveals her own chaos, you don't just mourn her. You mourn the architecture that kept you from falling into yourself. She wasn't your answer. She was your shelter from the question. Søren Kierkegaard never condemned love. He condemned how we use it. For the man who hasn't built a self, who hasn't chosen, suffered, stood still in the center of his own solitude, romantic love becomes a sacred evasion. It carries the appearance of intimacy, the rituals of connection, the mythology of fate. But underneath it all, it is architecture, emotional scaffolding, a temporary structure that saves you from facing the question, what if this is all there is, and I must build meaning with no blueprint? To be in love feels noble, devout, almost divine. But Kierkegaard saw something darker beneath it. He believed the modern man is terrified, not of death, but of freedom. Not of being unloved, but of standing alone with no narrative, no coordinates, no guiding structure. And so the woman becomes not a partner, but a spiritual solution, a direction, an anchor, a way to postpone the radical responsibility of existence. You didn't love her. You used her to avoid meeting your own life. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because once you've turned a woman into a symbol, you've given her a weight she can't carry. You didn't want her. You wanted exemption from the burden of building yourself, from the silence that follows when you stop outsourcing your identity. Love becomes your religion. She becomes your God, and in worshiping her, you no longer have to choose yourself. But no woman, no matter how radiant, nurturing, or devoted, can save you from that choice forever. Eventually, the illusion cracks, her imperfections appear, her distance grows, the fantasy destabilizes, and when it does, what collapses isn't just the relationship. What collapses is the lie you built around it. You told yourself it was sacred. You told yourself she completed you, but what she really did was delay your reckoning. The reckoning with the self you refused to become. The reckoning with the silence you refused to hear. the reckoning with the weight of your own freedom. Kierkegaard called this dread, the vertigo of standing on the edge of your own possibility, not knowing what comes next, not knowing who you are without the one who told you. And that's why her absence hurts so much, not because she's gone, but because now there's no one left between you and the truth. Let's tell the truth. You didn't just want her. You needed her to keep you from seeing what your life had quietly become without her. Before her, there was confusion, no inner compass, no center. You drifted, not in motion, but in meaning. Every plan was temporary, every identity borrowed, and then she appeared, not just as a woman, but as a path. She didn't give you purpose. She gave your avoidance a narrative. She became the reason to wake up, to work harder, to care again. But she wasn't a partner. She was your justification for not facing the void. A beautiful detour from the tension of becoming someone on your own terms. And here's the truth most men never say out loud. It wasn't her leaving that broke you. It was the reintroduction to yourself after she left. That quiet, that chaos, that shapelessness. It returned like a previous self, waiting in the shadows, unimproved, unchosen, still afraid. You weren't mourning her. You were mourning the disappearance of the illusion, the false coherence she created, the temporary order she represented. You miss who you got to be in her presence, not because it was real, because it was easier than doing the work alone. That version of you, the better man, the focused man, the finally stable man, was only ever real in her reflection. You built your self-concept inside her gaze, so when she pulled it away, there was nothing left to hold it up. She didn't just take herself. She took the mirror you needed to keep from disappearing. That is the secret fear most men live with. Without her gaze, do I exist? Without her approval, do I matter? Without her presence, do I have a center? And the answer, when you haven't built one, is no, you don't. Not yet. But that's not an ending. That's the real beginning. And Kierkegaard would say, only when the illusion is stripped, when the scaffolding falls, and when no woman can carry your freedom for you, only then does the self have a chance to emerge. But not through longing, through standing, through choosing. And choice is what you've spent your whole life avoiding. The collapse doesn't begin when she leaves. It begins in the silence between two people pretending they're still living the story. That's where it fractures. In small, almost invisible moments. A look that doesn't land. A sentence that once meant something, now received like a chore. You replay old memories to remind yourself that this once felt alive. You say, we've just lost the spark. But somewhere, quietly, you know, you're not losing a spark. You're watching the scaffolding rot from the inside. Kierkegaard described this condition as despair from weakness, when the self begins to sense that the identity it's clinging to is false, but chooses to remain. Not because it believes in the illusion, but because it doesn't believe it can survive outside it. And that's where you were. You knew it was breaking. You saw how you had turned her from a woman into a fantasy. You felt the strain of holding her responsible for your coherence. But the alternative, letting go, felt worse. So you negotiated with the story. You told yourself, this is what long-term love feels like. You renamed avoidance as patience. You spiritualized the gap between you. You called it growth. But it wasn't growth, it was fear, narrated beautifully. You weren't loving her anymore. You were preserving your own mythology, because as long as she stayed, you didn't have to face what you had built your life on. That's why you stopped speaking honestly. That's why everything became so fragile. That's why you felt tired around her, even when nothing had happened. Because keeping the illusion alive was exhausting. You didn't just lose connection with her. You lost connection with the performance of connection. And slowly, quietly, You began to feel the truth that Kierkegaard named centuries ago, that the worst kind of despair is knowing the illusion is dead and pretending it isn't. So you held the shape of love long after its contents had drained out. Not because it was true, but because it gave you something to point at when you didn't want to point at yourself. You see, the story didn't shatter. It expired, and you helped it linger, because even the illusion of intimacy felt safer than the confrontation of self. So what remains now? Not the fantasy, not the myth of the one, not the story where your life gained meaning simply because she entered it. That scaffold has collapsed. And what's left? Stillness, but not the comforting kind. It's the stillness that arrives after a structure falls, the kind that kicks up dust and leaves you staring at everything that was never real. You're not grieving her. You're confronting the emptiness she once concealed. Before her, you had no direction, no architecture, just pressure and potential with no form. She gave it shape. She gave your drift a destination. And now that she's gone, it's not just heartbreak you're facing, it's exposure, not to pain, to the structure that was never there. You say she changed you, that you were better with her, but now you see what she really did. She gave your avoidance a storyline. She let you postpone becoming someone. She gave your indecision a romance. She disguised your fear as devotion. And now, without her, the silence is louder than the loss. Because you're not just without her, you're without the narrative that made your emptiness feel purposeful. You didn't just lose love, you lost your favorite excuse for not building a life. This isn't collapse, this is confrontation. This is the moment where illusion doesn't just fall away, it refuses to return. And in that clarity, there's no comfort, only the slow realization that no one is coming to carry what you keep avoiding. She didn't hold you together, she just paused the moment you'd have to do it yourself. Kierkegaard said the aesthetic life always ends the same way, in despair, not because it was wrong, but because it could never hold. It gave you beauty, intensity, direction, but it could never give you yourself. And now, here you are, after the collapse, after the silence, after the scaffolding has been stripped away. You are not being punished, you are being returned. To what? To the one thing you've always been able to delay, but never escape: choice. This is the beginning of what Kierkegaard called the ethical life. Not ethical as in good, but ethical as in chosen. A life no longer built around avoidance, projection, or performance. A life that cannot lean on love to give it structure. A life that demands you create meaning without a muse to carry it. And here's the burden. You don't get to use her anymore. Not as an excuse, not as a direction, not as a source of potential, not as a way to explain why you haven't yet become yourself. She is gone. And the illusion of salvation is gone with her. What remains is you, and the question you can no longer run from. Will you now choose yourself deliberately, without the audience, without the romance, without the narrative? Or will you chase the next version of her, the next escape dressed as desire, the next beautiful excuse? This is the real grief, not losing her, but losing the ability to pretend she could ever save you. Now the curtain is down, and there's only one thing left that matters: what you do now that there's no one left to do it for you. You told yourself she gave your life meaning, that without her nothing made sense. But now you know the truth. She didn't give you meaning. She gave you a way to avoid having to make it yourself. And when she left, it wasn't just a heart that broke. It was a delay that ended. You don't miss her. You miss who you got to be in her shadow. The man who could still pretend he hadn't chosen anything yet. But that pretending is over now. And the silence she left behind? It isn't waiting to be filled. It's waiting to be faced. So ask yourself, If she was the story that made everything else bearable, who are you now that there's no story left?